We continue now at the top of Daf Zayin Amid Aleph and Meseches Bava Basra. This is Bava Basra Daf 7a. On the previous summit, the Gemara was dealing with the case of two brothers. They divided a property. One of the brothers lived on the lower floor, and the other one lived on the upper floor. And then the property started to sink, so that it was difficult for the person on the lower floor to be able to access his living area because he had to bend down to get into the door. So he asked his brother on the upper floor, "Let's rebuild." And the brother on the upper floor says, "I don't want to do that." So Amar Lei, so then the brother on the lower floor said to the brother on the upper floor, "Isteria Novi Ivne, let me, I'll do the rebuilding." Amar, so then he said, the brother on the upper floor said, "Leslie duchta lemeidarba, but even if you're going to pay for the entire rebuilding, but I don't have a place to live." Amar Lei, so then he said to him, "Ana ogar loch duchta, I'll rent you a place so you'll have a place to live." Amar Lei, he said back, "Lo terachni," he said, "It's too much of a bother for me. I don't want to have to move all of my stuff." And the Bach puts in the word Amar Lei, he said to him, "Lo kamitar li," this is the person again on the lower floor. He said, "I can't really live here, it's not possible." Amar Lei, so the brother on the upper floor said back to him, "Shofa krisach viol, v'shofa kresach upok." You should bend down on your stomach to get in, bend down on your stomach to get out. You have to use it in that fashion. And the point over here is that the brother on the upper floor, he did not want to do any rebuilding. He didn't want to have to move out. Amar Rav Chama says, "Bedino kamakev," the brother on the upper floor, he's correct. He has the law on his side. But the Gemara says, "V'hani mili delo matu kashura lemata me'asar." That's only if the beams don't go below 10 tfachim, meaning to say it doesn't lower so much that he has less than 10 tfachim of airspace. Aval matu kashura lemata me'asar. But if the beams are already below or within 10 tfachim of the ground, so he doesn't even have 10 tfachim, meaning the brother in the lower floor doesn't even have that amount, then Motzi Amar Le, then he could say to him, Lamata miyud, already below 10 tfachim, within 10 tfachim of the ground, Rishusa didihu, that's my rishus, that's my property, it's my airspace, velo mishabed loch, it's not mishabed to you, you have no ownership, and therefore you're essentially encroaching on my property, then already he can force him to rebuild. V'hani mili delo asnu gabe hadadi, and the Gemara says also, that's only true if they didn't make a condition ahead of time. Aval asnu gabe hadadi, but let's say when they divided up the property, they made a condition, and the condition was that if the property sinks, then they'll be able to rebuild, so then sasri uvanu, so then they destroy it and then they rebuild. And the Gemara continues, V'chiasnu b'hadi hadadi, but even if they make this condition, ad kama, what is the exact dimensions where we say that if it goes below those dimensions, then they rebuild? Amru Rabbanan kame de Rabba, the Rabbanan said in front of Rabba, some have the gears of Rava, Mishmei de Marzutra breder of Nachman, in the name of Marzutra, the son of Rav Nachman, Diyamar Mishmei de Rav Nachman, who says in the name of Rav Nachman, Ka'osa sheshaninu, it's like that which we learned, this is later on, Rumo kechatzi arko, kechatzi rachbo, that the height should be like half of the length and half of the width. If you add together half of the length and half of the width, that should be the height. So if it's below that already, then they'll rebuild. But the Gemara continues, Amar Lahu Rabba, Rabba said back to them, again some have Rava, Lava mina lahu, didn't I say to you, Lo tislu be buke suriki be Rav Nachman, don't hang empty pictures on Rav Nachman, which is essentially a way of saying, don't attribute to Rav Nachman something that doesn't make sense. Rather, Hachi Amar Rav Nachman, this is really what Rav Nachman said, Ki de dairi inchi, it's the way that people normally live, the common, how much space does this person in the lower floor need, and if it's less than that, then we'll say that they rebuild. Amar Rav Huna b'reid Rav Yoshua, Rav Huna the son of Rav Yoshua says, Ki hechi da'aili isurisa de mechuza, v'hader, it's in order that people bring in the bundles of reeds of mechuza, and they're able to turn around. If you have enough space to do that, then it's enough space, otherwise it's considered to be too little. And Rashi explains, Shufa Kreisach, again the brother on the upper floor tells the one on the lower floor to bend down to your stomach. Shacha kol maschad Kreisach, you have to bend down your height so that you're at the level of your stomach, and that way you'll go in and out. Keshure is koros wa'aliyah, let's say the beams of the upper floor, if they go within 10 tvachim of the ground, that's already too low. Aval asnu hadadi, then the Gemara said, but if they make a condition, keshacholko, meaning when they divided the property, they made the condition as follows, im tishbal aliyah yistaru habayis v'yivnu, that if the aliyah, if it should end up lowering, if the whole building should sink, so then they're going to rebuild, so then they follow the condition. Ad kama tashbel aliyah v'yochaf as elyon lister v'livnos, how much does it have to sink into the ground that now you can force the person in the upper floor to destroy and rebuild? And Rashi continues, Ka'osa sheshaninu, it's like the Mishnah we learned later on, B'hamocher peiros hamakabel ala mechavero livnos lo bayis, somebody says to build a house for his friend, he accepts upon himself that he's going to build a house for his friend. Osa rumo kechatzi yarko v'chatzi rachbo, it says that the height should be like like half the length and half the width. Kebinyan ha'heichel, it's like the heichel itself. Shaya orcho arboim v'rachvo esrim. It was a length of 40. It was a width of 20. So you take half of 40, that's 20. You take half of 20, that's 10. That comes out to 30. V'gavo shloshim. And so that's why its height was 30. Isurisa. Then they said it has to be the amount that you take this bundle of reeds. Chavilos kanim aruchin. This is bundles of long reeds. V'hadar machzer atzma l'chol tzadin. If he's able to turn around in every direction and that can fit, so that's considered to be enough space. Otherwise, it's not considered to be enough space and it has to be rebuilt. And the Gemara continues, how gavra dave bani ashisa achore kavoy dechavre. There was a person who built a wall behind the windows of his neighbor, essentially blocking the light from going in through the windows. Amar lei, so he said to him, Kama felas alai, you're causing it to be dark for me. Amar lei said to him, Sacharna lochach, I'll close up these windows over here. V'avidna loch kavi le'el mashisai, and then we'll make windows higher up from the wall, and so then it won't be a problem, the light will get through. Amarle, but he said to him still, Kamaris leila shisai, if you're going to make these new windows in the wall, that's going to damage the wall. Amarle, so he said to him, Sasarna loch la shisach adeduchta dekvi. So what we'll do is, we'll destroy completely the wall up till the level of the windows. Uvanino lo, and so then I'll build a new wall from there upward. Va'avidna loch kavi bevinyana le'el mashisai. And then I'll make these windows in the wall, in the building, above the level of the wall. Amarle said back to him, Ashisa mitasa atika umilael charata lokaim. He said, if you have a wall and in the bottom it's an old wall, and then you attach a new wall on top of the old wall, that doesn't really sustain itself well. That's not a good solution. Amarle said to him, Sasarna lad lara, so then we'll destroy it all the way to the ground. Uvanina la va'avidna loch kavi begava, so then I'll rebuild it from the bottom all the way up, and I'll put the windows in there. Amarle said to him, Chada ashisa charata bechule beisa atika lokaim. If you have one new wall with a bunch of old walls and old house, that's not going to sustain itself either. Amar Leisa, then he said to him, Sasarna la lekule beisa, fine, so I'll destroy the whole house. Uvanina lach kivi bevinyan, and I'll build a new house and put windows in the proper space. Amar Leisa said to him, Leslie duchta lemeidar, but I don't like that solution either, because I have nowhere to live if you're going to destroy my house even temporarily. Amar Leisa said to him, Agirna lach duchta, so he said, I'll rent you a new place where you can stay in the meantime. Amar Leisa said to him, Lo trachna, I don't want the bother of having to move all my stuff out. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Chama says, and again this is the same Rav Chama as above, Bidin kama'akif, what he's saying is actually according to the law. You can't force him to move out and then rebuild his house. And the Gemara says, Hainu hach. The Gemara says, well, isn't that really the same exact thing? What Rav Chama is saying over here, that's what he just said above as well. V'hasu lamali, so what do we need to teach the same thing again? And the Gemara says, Hakamash malon, Rav Chama is teaching over here, Di'ava gav de lo mishtamish elativnu beit sivi, even though all you're doing is using this particular house for straw and wood. Beit sivi bialma, he's just using it, he's not even using it as his main living quarters. So maybe over there he doesn't have this claim that I don't want to move all of my stuff somewhere else, so you can't rent me a different space. Maybe he doesn't have such a claim when he's not really living in this area, he's just using it for storage. And so Rav Chama is saying, no, he still has this claim. The person can say, I don't want it to be that I have to move out what I'm storing over here to somewhere else. Rather, you need to take down your wall. And the Gemara continues, Hanu beitrei achi depalge behadi hadadi. There were two brothers who divided property with each other. Chad matya aspelida v'chad matya tarbitza. One of them got a hall, and one of them got a garden. Azalahu de matya tarbitza v'kabani ashisa apuma daspelida. The one who got the garden, he went ahead, and he built a wall right at the entrance of the hall. Amar le, so the person who had the hall said to him, Come afelas alai, you're causing it to be dark for me. There's supposed to be light coming in, that's the whole point. Amar le, he said back to him, Bididi kabanina, but I'm building in my own property. What's wrong with that? Amar Rav Chama says, Bidin kamar la. What he's saying is actually according to the law, meaning he's building within his own property. That's a good claim. Amar le Ravina le Ravashi. Ravina said to Ravashi, My shna mehadetanya. What's the difference from the following brisa? Shnayachin shacholko. You have a brisa which says you have two brothers that divide. Echad mehen natal sada kerem, ve'echad mehen natal sada lavan. One of them takes a field, it's a vineyard. One of them takes grain. Yeshlo lebal hakerem daled amos besada lavan. So the person who owns the vineyard, he gets 4 amos in that other field because that's how he's able to work the vineyard properly. Shal menas kein cholko, because that's the condition of the division. The condition is from the outset that he's going to get that space, and that should be the same thing over here. Isn't it a condition from the beginning that he gets to have the light coming in from the garden? Amarle said to him, you can't compare to that brisa. Hasam da'alu lahadadi. Over there, what essentially happened was they did some kind of evaluation valuation, and basically that was the terms of their agreement, that he gets this space to work the vineyard. Essentially, they divided up according to the value. Maybe he gave him some money for that right, whatever it was, they did some kind of evaluation. But over here, over here, they never made such an evaluation, so he's not entitled to the light coming in from the garden. But the Gemara says that's not true. What? The case over here is we're dealing with brothers who are idiots, that they're not going to do any evaluation before dividing. You think that one of them took the hall, one of them took the garden, and they made no evaluation to make sure they were dividing fairly. Amarle said to him, no, granted that when it comes to the value of the various bricks and the beams, so that they actually did do an evaluation to make sure it was fair. But when it came to the airspace, that value, they never really made such an evaluation. That's why he's entitled to build within his own property. But the Gemara still says, why doesn't he say to him, meaning the person who took the hall should be able to say to the brother who took the garden, originally we divided out that I was going to have a hall, but hashta mashvis leidrona. Now instead, I have an idrona. I basically have a small dark room, so that really is not a fair division if you're going to block out the light. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Shimi Barashi says, Shma bi'alma palagle. All they're really dividing is just a name. That's what it's called, but it doesn't necessarily have to have particular features. And we see that in other examples. Milo Tanya, didn't we learn in a brisa? Ha'omer base kor afar ani mocherlach. Let's say a person says, I'm selling you a base core of property. Even though it's only a lesach of property, it's not as much space. Higio, that's still considered to be a good sale. Shalom mocherlo elashma, because he's just selling him what it is referred to as. For who the miskri base core, that area is called a base core. That's the same idea over here. This area is called an ispelida. Or similarly, pardis ani mocherlach. Let's say he says, I'm selling you an orchard. Afa bishein bo rimonim, even though there's no actual pomegranates. Higio, that's considered to be a good sale. Shalom mocherlo elashma. He's selling it to him by name. V'hu de miskri pardes, as long as it's called a pardes, that is sufficient. Kerem ani mocherlach. Similarly, if he says, I'm selling you a kerem, afa bishein bo gefanim, even though there's no vines, higio, that's considered to be a good sale. Shalom mocherlo elashma. He's selling it to him by name. V'hu de miskri karma, as long as it's called a kerem, as long as it's called a vineyard, that is good enough. But the Gemara continues, Midami, can you really compare the two cases? Can you compare our case to this brisa? Hasam over there, Motzi Amar le Mocher lelokeach, the seller can say to the buyer, Shema zavinilach, that I sold it to you by name. But Hachabat over here, Motzi Amar le, he can say to him, meaning the brother who took the hall can say to the other brother, Adai tadachi palge de da'ir nabe kiechi de dara avasan. It was on the understanding when we divided that I would live there in the same way that our father lived there. There was always light coming into the hall. That was the understanding that would continue. And the Gemara continues, Amrulay, they said to him, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Zayin Amid Beis.